Week 3 of HRM 310, Organizational Development. I'm Dr. Stutzman, and I just wanted to leave you a brief video message, look a little bit at some of the papers and projects you've been working on, and maybe some tips that I've found through my grading. Hopefully you received your at least your intro grades. Most of those were really good. You got all 5 points. It's kind of was the freebie if you actually follow the directions and did a video. For those of you who didn't do the video, you did lose some points from that. Now moving forward, and I'm starting to grade the week 2 discussion boards. I do grade to make sure that you actually are doing the work, and so I do have some pointers and some tips that I wanted to share with you for week 3 as you work through those discussion boards for the future. Looking at the schedule for week 3, it doesn't look like you actually have a discussion board, but again, I started reading some of week 2's and I wanted to give you some pointers. So let's start off there with the discussion boards. I have some notes here I wanted to share with you. A few pointers. So the first thing is just making sure that you actually do your discussion board on time. And at least for the intros, we were good. There's a few of you who are late with week 2. That does hurt your grade. You want to make sure that, if they're due midnight on Wednesday, get that first initial post in on Wednesday before midnight, and then you have to do the additional 2 posts. So the second point I wanted to bring up was that you do need to do all 3 posts. With my rubric, I do look at when you actually do the post. If you post all of your posts in one day, you don't get full credit for that, because the point of it is you're supposed to be posting, going back on, reading, posting, going back on, and reading. So you probably want to sign in multiple times and make multiple posts that way to get the full credit. The next point that I wanted to make is to make sure that you're citing your material. You're going to lose a lot of points if you're not connecting to the text and citing your material. All I ask to be able to get the full credit is to at least on your initial post that you're looking at whatever text or video you're supposed to be posting about. You're actually citing that video or that post. Now, citing YouTube videos and whatnot is a little bit more difficult. So you're going to want to check the APA, MLA books for how to do that correctly, but you're going to have a little reference at the bottom or works cited after your post, and you're going to make sure that you cite the information that you took and wrote about. So make sure that there's some connections at least in that initial post, and then put that citation at the bottom underneath of your initial post. The initial post should have some meat to it. It should have a little bit of information. It should be academic in nature, not just a few little ditties about, oh yeah, this video was really nice and I think this is cool. No, why do you think it's cool? Why do you agree? Why do you disagree? And then you're going to want to connect that again to the video or article that you're reading. So that's the third point. The fourth point that I wanted to make was that in your responses, you can connect to the text. That'll probably get you some extra points. You don't have to do that. But refrain from just simply agreeing or disagreeing with someone else's post. So when I'm grading, I can't really give you full credit if you're just like, hey, yeah, Frank, that was a great post that you gave, and I totally agree with you on that. And then you write like one more sentence. Well, you're not really, contributing to the conversation. You're just saying that's great or that's not great. So why don't you explain maybe why you agree or why you disagree, and add some weight to that conversation. So I would say definitely more than 2 sentences for your responses. I think some of you sometimes get a little lazy and just write a sentence or 2. But this is for academic credit, and I want you to actually learn something. So hopefully you're reading what your colleagues are saying, and then you're processing and thinking about it, and then hopefully giving them a good response so that they can write back and you can have a conversation with them. And then the last point, number 5, is simply just to spell check and make sure that your formatting and whatnot is good. Discussion boards, when we're typing things online, sometimes we get a little lazy, and I do that myself sometimes with spelling and grammar and things like that. So if you want the maximum points, just be careful and actually reread the things that you write This is not, you're not texting these answers out. You want to actually write them out. Probably write them in Word and then copy them over. That would be my suggestion. So those are my 5 tips for the discussion boards. We're going to move on to some tips for writing your papers. And then we're going to look at the 2 assignments that are due for week 3 and kind of how those connect with some of my pointers with that. So the first thing I wanted to say about papers is make sure that you are writing them in 12 font Times New Roman. So the font is Times New Roman, the size is the 12 font. Try to be consistent unless you are supposed to be creative with one of your assignments. That's kind of a standard in the industry to have your fonts and size to look like that. I would also recommend 1-inch margins around the sides as well, so that your paper doesn't look all wonky with text over here or over here. So that's just something to remember, because I'm going to be reading a lot of these papers, and you don't want yours to stand out in the sense that it looks really awkward and the formatting is a little messed up. The second part is just being careful about your APA citations and your headings and whatnot. I am okay with if you want to do a paper in MLA, as long as you're very consistent with that. So that means you do the correct citations for MLA and you do the correct references for MLA. Wilmington recommends that we work through APA. So again, I would recommend you do that. You should have some experience with APA since that's what you've been doing for your other classes. So I would stick with it. But if for some reason you love MLA, then do that. Now, when you're doing your headers and things like your title pages and headers, those don't count towards your page numbers. So if you do like a whole page header or half a page header, that's not counting towards actual writing. Towards, if it says 1 to 2 pages, you need to make sure that you have 1 to 2 pages worth of actual information that you're writing, and not just titles and headers and references. Those don't count towards your page limits or maximums. So my next point was page limits. And if a paper is 1 to 2 pages, then it's simply that. Like, I'm not going to give you credit if you go under a page, or if you only write 1 full page and half of that is a header at the top or the professor's name and your name. You might laugh at me saying that, but I've gotten a lot of papers where, you write the date and then you write the professor's name, then you write the class, and you write your name, and you throw a couple more spaces in, then you write a title for the paper, and then you finish off the page with 3 or 4 sentences, and you turn that in as a 1-page paper. Well, that's not 1 page. So you want to make sure that it's actual 1 page of writing. If it says like 1 to 2 pages, usually what I say, a rule of thumb, is it should at least be 1 page, and the maximum it should be is 2.5, because once you hit over 2.5, then you're getting closer to 3 pages. So try to limit sometimes what you say. For those of you who love to write, it might be hard for you to kind of limit that, but again, just imagine how many papers professors have to grade. We want to make sure that the students are able to be concise with the information and really just give us what we want to hear, and kind of what you've learned from that assignment, instead of just going on and kind of writing things just to make it sound better and better. So sometimes less is more in that instance. If you have any questions about that, please ask me. But again, as a reference, if it has a page limit, again, you should stick with the minimum of the minimum number of pages. And then the maximum would be whatever that is plus a half if you want to go over. So you can always go over a half. So if it's a 3 to 4 page paper, again, 3 pages is the minimum. The maximum would be 4.5. I have another memo here of watching formatting. I mentioned that before. But sometimes students get a little carried away with some of their formatting. And let me give you a really good example, because this week you're going to be writing a memo, an organizational memo. So hopefully you're watching this video, because if you don't, you're probably going to lose some points, because every year or every class that I teach on this specific assignment, students miss the directions when it says write a memo, and so they just almost write a paper. Well, this is practice for the real world, and when you actually get a memo in the business world, it looks like a memo. So go, if you have no clue what I'm talking about, go online, Google memo, and you'll actually see what a formatted memo looks like. There's, it says memo on it. It has kind of a date. It has who it's coming from, who it's going to. And it doesn't necessarily have a signature or anything at the end, because usually, again, who it's coming from is up at the top. So just Google memos. You're going to see a whole bunch of examples, and you're going to want to follow a memo format when you're actually writing this paper. So just pretend you're actually writing for somebody at the place that you work at, and you're turning it into them. So that's just something that you can actually use this week, because you're going to be writing that memo. So let's look at that memo for a second. I have, again, some notes here that I wanted to share with you. It says, I believe, a one-page memo. So if you go over a page, you can go maybe to 1.5, but try to keep it at 1 page if you can. Even with that header at the top, just don't make it giant. And usually when you're turning in a sheet to somebody and it is a memo, it's not 2 or 3 pages long. That wouldn't be a memo. That would be a document, or have a different name when you're turning it in. So try to keep it to that 1 page, 1.5 page for the memo. Another thing that I wanted to mention as far as writing papers is, I definitely recommend that you read what the assignment is. So don't get confused with this assignment with the memo. So let's look at that. You're supposed to recommend to your boss or your leader that you lead a project. So again, this class is organizational development. We're looking at going inside organizations and understanding the culture, and understanding ways that we can change things that aren't working and fix things that aren't working, find solutions, make things work smoothly, and to take care of the people inside the organization. So those are all the things that we're looking at. And so as a leadership consultant, or even as a leadership employee, you can go to your boss and you're actually going to write this memo recommending to them that you lead this change. So the first thing you want to do is to come up with a reason why you need to change something. So if there's an issue, and again, make this up. This is something you can make up, or you can actually look at your current organization. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you could write about, because even in my organization that I work in, I could easily write one of these memos, because there's things that need to be changed. So you're going to come up with a reason why you need change. And then you're going to write this memo to a manager saying, this is what I need to change, and this is why you need to choose me to do it. This is how I'm going to implement it. And you're going to talk about this change checklist. Now, in the past, I've had students get too wrapped up in the actual change checklist. You're not writing an actual change checklist. You're talking about how you're going to use the change checklist to institute change. There's a big difference there. So if you Google change checklist, you're going to see actual checklists of how you're going to put together a change for an organization. You're not going to do that, but you're going to allude to the checklist, because you're going to explain to the manager how you're going to put this change through, and kind of why they should select you to do it. So you will reference your checklist and kind of what your checklist is about, but you're not actually writing the memo with your checklist on it. So don't get confused with that. So that's another reason, again, why you should read the actual assignments. And on the assignment, it actually details all of that information. And I don't know why students every year continue to just send me a change checklist instead of an actual memo explaining the change checklist and why it's important. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And another great example of following the questions that are asked on assignments. And just as an aside, I really believe students in my class easily get a B on every assignment if they actually read what the directions are and just produce the answers for those assignments. It's very, very simple. A lot of times you think a little bit too hard and you try to be too creative, and then that's where students get lost a little bit. So for the next assignment, the Lean on Me assignments, you're going to watch a video. So please make sure you watch it, because I'll know you didn't watch it if you're not able to answer the questions correctly. So you watch it, and then there's specific questions that it asks you, and you actually have to answer all those questions. Now, when you're writing that paper, it will be more of an academic paper. You're going to have your APA style with your header and whatnot, and your references and citations. Make sure that you cite even the movie. So look on APA MLA how to cite from a movie. If you're using direct quotes, if you're using specific details, you want to make sure that you cite that, or at least allude to the fact that you're taking it from the film. Now, when you're answering the questions, what you don't want to do is to write like question 1 and you bold it and then you answer the question. Question 2 and you bold it and you answer the question. Question 3, you bold it. That's not, necessarily an academic paper. Maybe you would do that in a lab where you would write questions and then answer them. So you're going to actually answer all those questions in the flow of a paper. You have an introduction, you have a conclusion, and as you're writing the paper, you're going to talk about Joe Clark and the things that you've observed about Joe Clark and whatnot. So you're going to kind of work through the paper like that by answering all the questions in a paper form and not just in a formal question and answer, if that makes sense. Again, if you have any other questions about this, or if I'm not making any sense, please send me an email. I'd be happy to work through this with you. I was hoping that we could talk about this on my last online conference call, I guess, however you want to say it, for the class, but none of you guys showed up, so I was on my own for that. So that's why I decided to do this video, to give you some pointers, some of the things I was going to talk about during that time. I'm going to look at my other notes here. Some other things we just talked about making sure that the paper flows. Something else that you want to do for this Lean On Me assignment is not make the summary super long. So don't re-editate or regurgitate the whole entire movie in your summary. Obviously, if I'm grading the paper, I've already watched the film. I've watched it, numerous times, and I've graded these papers numerous times. So you don't need to go through and tell me every little thing that's happened in the film and then start answering the questions. Just give a nice, concise synopsis of this is kind of the storyline. This is what was going on. This is kind of the history behind it. And then you can kind of get started with your paper and your points. And then, as I said before, make sure you're connecting back to the text. You can use other online resources to help defend your points or validate your points. And that's always great in academic writing. The more things you can use to support yourself, the better. And in this case, you're probably going to use the video to cite to support some of the things that you're bringing to my attention and in answering the questions. And ultimately, you're really looking at the leadership of Joe Clark and looking at organizational change and organizational behavior, because that's, again, think about what the class is focused on and then connect that to the movie and watch it with that in the back of your mind. So think about the organization that Joe Clark is going in. What are the issues? What are the needs? And how is he addressing those issues and those needs? What is he doing that's right? What is he doing that's wrong? What was the reaction of the people when he made certain choices, when he did things or didn't do things? How did that affect people? How did that affect the change? How did that affect the outcome? So be thinking in those kinds of terms as an OD professional, organizational development professional, when you're watching this movie, not just watching it as a critic of the movie, but kind of from the context of maybe I'm a leadership consultant, organizational development consultant, and what did this person do that was right and what did this person do that was wrong, and then how did that affect the culture of the organization, or in this case the school, and then the students themselves. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of reference as you go through these next two big assignments. Again, I don't believe that there's this discussion board due this week, but hopefully you can take those initial notes I gave you and use them for next week. If there's any other questions that you have, please feel free to contact me and let me know. I want to be available to answer your concerns and your questions. I hope you're enjoying the course so far, and I'm going to try to end this video soon so I can stay under 20 minutes because I know all of you have full-time jobs and other things to do with your time than to watch me talk in my kitchen. But I've appreciated getting to know you, and it was awesome. This is the first year that we did the video intros, and so I loved watching you all and getting to know you a little bit better. So blessings to you all, and have a great rest of your week. For some of you who are turning in those late papers, or I gave you grace to turn in papers tonight because of the Labor Day last week, I'm looking forward to reading those. And I will see you later this week. All right, thanks.